and more. And so that's 12,000 sites. That site list was updated in 2003, where it jumped from 12,754 sites on the 1997 list. I don't know if you could see this right here, to 2003, when more than 68,000 protected areas were listed with the IUCN in United Nations Protected Areas list. Such a large list that they couldn't even publish the actual locations. They're on a CD-ROM. Now, it's important to point out that this United Nations list of protected areas expanded from 12,000 sites to more than 68,000. They have different categories for the reasons they're managing the areas. It includes managed and maintained mainly for science, Category 1A, maintained mainly for wilderness protection, Category 1B, maintained for ecosystem and recreation, i.e. national parks, Category 2, maintained because it's a national monument, Category 3, to Category 4, where there's habitat and species management areas protected for conservation. And that becomes important because of stuff like this, Executive Order 13112, which defines protection for invasive species. However, many scholars have realized that the vague definition of invasive species can and has been used to curb human and domestic animal activity, i.e. reining in human population as well as its industry and agriculture, because it could include everything from domesticated livestock to pets, houseplants, front lawns, neighborhood golf courses, food crops, and even that adaptive, resilient species known as Homo sapiens. And so the Invasive Species Council is the type of entity that could use Category 4 habitat species management area, as they want to, as I pointed out before, under Agenda 21, concentrate the human populations. Again, that's something that Michael Kaufman, the expert, gets into. You also have Category 5, protected landscapes and seascapes, mainly for conservation and recreation. Then they point out, since 1997, they added Category 6, managed resource protected area managed mainly for the sustainable use of natural ecosystems. So there you have areas set aside just for so-called sustainability, a very important buzzword to all these United Nations treaties, from the 1992 Rio meeting and treaty to the Convention on Biological Diversity that Michael Kaufman covers, to the Agenda 21 stuff. And this other article out of Spy Witness talks about how the Global Biodiversity Assessment is 1,140 pages, Agenda 21's 300 pages, Our Global Neighborhood is 410 pages, and that's just a few of the agreements that outline this emerging international law based around sustainability and wildlife management that will have grave consequences on the development of human society. That is, in essence, why this is so important. That's why Alex covers it in his America Destroyed by Design film, as well as the seminal Endgame film. Now, some of the other executive orders that have been passed to help with this include the 1997 Executive Order 13061, which officially established the American Heritage Rivers Initiative that allows the federal government to take control of large parcels of land adjacent to U.S. rivers. And it was just recently we interviewed people on how they're forcing flood insurance and allowing things like hydroelectric dams to take over all kinds of privately owned land near U.S. rivers. And again, they have the primary core zones where, for instance, a national park would be completely restricted for whatever reason, whatever category they put it into. But then there is a buffer zone and an extended zone outside of that buffer zone that you heard the woman in the America Destroyed by Design clip refer to, that allows these United Nations related environmental groups to clamp down and restrict human activity in the buffer zone and the extended zone. For instance, Kaufman breaks down how Yellowstone Park and the so-called danger to that park allowed them to close a coal mine that operated 150 years before the establishment of that park, and also allowed them to consider the park in danger because it has too many visitors, too many tourists. That's the kind of stuff you're going to see. And by the way, it was these same robber baron groups, from the Rockefellers to the Harrimans, that worked with people like the Sierra Club founder John Muir to set up these national parks in the first place. It was always about a land grab and what was then federal power, now world government powers. And there's a lot more to cover there, but we're going to draw the line, I think, except for this executive order, which is 12986, the International Union for Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources, where it outlines immunity for all these international groups as they work on these biosphere areas. It makes them immune from property seizure, and it makes them immune from search and confiscation and from interference of all kind, basically giving them total jurisdiction over these areas that have been declared biospheres. You don't believe me? I gave you the documents. You look it up, and there's a whole lot more, too. We should get Michael Kaufman back on soon. Hopefully that's something Alex will see to. Now, we have other news, too, but just as a segue, I want to remind you of the article that came out in June of 2011 in the Wall Street Journal, and that is "Want to Buy a Piece of Greek Island." Now, on the one hand, you have the European debt crisis and the austerity moves where they're trying to sell off infrastructure, and thus this, where they want to auction off $42 billion in public property, namely choice Greek islands, and sell them to private investors. You saw how in Italy they're being accused of selling publicly owned infrastructure for pennies on the dollar to some of these bigwigs, and the same thing is going on in Greece, where they're auctioning off either outright ownership of very nice Greek islands there on the Mediterranean, or extended and cheap leases on them, where various types of choice corporations will be able to set up tourist traps and a whole lot more. Now, we have a brand new Alex vid where he breaks down not only the UN takeover of these lands, but the increasing amount of bureaucratic ninnying and interference and kind of TSA-style checkpoint questioning that's now going on in many of these parks. I've witnessed it myself here in Texas at state parks. Let's check out that video now.
All right, my friends, we're here at the entrance of Carlsbad Caverns in southern New Mexico, and I am traveling through the Southwest here in the next week. I'll also still be doing my radio show live via Skype every day from 11 to 2, but I'm traveling through the Southwest, basically on the same path I took in 1997 when I shot America Destroyed by Design. I want to see how America has changed, and we've hit our first destination, scheduled destination. Last night we saw the nuclear waste being hauled, and that's still a mystery what type of waste it was. It said U.S. government plates, and that video is posted here on our YouTube channel and at Infowars.com. Now we've gotten to Carlsbad Caverns. We're going to go to other destinations, but we don't want the establishment to know where we're going to be next. We want to get their real response. I get here, I'm polite with my family. The park rangers, there's about 3 or 4 times as many as there was when I was just here 5 years ago with my children, or I guess 6 years ago. Then I was here about a decade before that as a college, and then I was here as a child twice. Totally different now from even just 5, 6 years ago. They interrogated me when I was buying the tickets about who I was, where I was coming from, what I was doing, where I'd been. All, of course, because of white nose syndrome or whatever in the East, even though these Mexican bats here are immune to it. It's been shown. Side issue. And they did it like it was a conversation. Then it was other questions. Then we went through 2 other segments of being questioned before we got here. And then we were told all these rules and regulations, that we're basically lucky to be here. And it's just this whole attitude by government. So now Carlsbad Caverns is beginning to have the TSA type things creep in. I told you 5 years ago the NFL would start groping your genitals just like TSA. And now they're talking about putting microwave scanners in at them, and they're groping you from ankle to neck. They're doing it at high school areas. They're doing it all over the country. We're converting to a police state. And every culture and government and corporations, when you go to get a rent car, they interrogate you. Where are you going? What are you doing? Who are you visiting? They're putting it in a database. It's all part of Patriot Act. And it just shows how this country is completely converted into a third world style police state if we allow this to continue. And so that's basically the report we're giving you. I mean, look at this. I came here when I was in college with friends. We spent the whole day, and then we came and saw the bats fly out here at the amphitheater. I'll give you a shot of that in a moment. But now look. Now they want you to know, do not, before it was don't have flash. Now it's don't videotape the bats when they fly out. which are just all over the place, under bridges and houses and caves everywhere, just tens of millions of them every few hundred square miles. They're all over the Southwest, but oh no, don't photograph them. It's all about bossing you around. It's all about getting in your space. It's all about treating you like you're some type of criminal. And I, for one, am just completely and totally sick of all of it. So we're going to follow some reports from down here for Infowars.com and Infowars Nightly News. And we will continue to travel to the Southwest and show you the other UN biospheres and heritage sites that the globalists are taking over. Alex Jones reporting for Infowars.com. All right, my friends.
And as you can see, it's not only a takeover of the physical lands, but an increasing bureaucratic pestering. As I mentioned, I was at a Texas state park where, among other things, they asked for my zip code and asked if I was hiding people in the car. I mean, is that what happens when you just try to have a good time at the park? Now, we're going to cover other news here, and then we have another exclusive Alex Jones video coming up, so stay tuned. Steve Watson reports for PrisonPlanet.com today that the Supreme Court in Minnesota is blocking the government's plan to claim outright ownership over DNA. And collecting and storing every newborn's blood violates the Genetic Privacy Act. And he writes how the case has exposed the fact that there is an ongoing semi-covert movement by state and federal governments to claim ownership over every newborn baby's DNA for the purpose of genetic research without the consent of individual citizens. And of course, this is a global DNA database. They're trying to map the human genome. It has eugenics tie-ins, and it has tie-ins with the development of bioweapons and the rest of it, including race-specific bioweapons. But specifically, the Minnesota Supreme Court has ruled that any parent of a newborn would have to be specifically informed and opt into the process rather than opting out as they had previously done. And since 2008, the State Department officials have begun seeking exemption for the so-called DNA warehouse from Minnesota's privacy law, the Genetic Privacy Act, something we need to cover more in depth later. We previously spoken to one of the main people involved with this, Twyla Brace. Perhaps we should get her back on. Sprint has launched its participation in the soon-to-be mandatory emergency alert messages. Earlier in October, you saw the takeover nationally of television and radio communications with the first-ever nationally coordinated emergency alert messages. Now they wish to branch out to mobile phones and the internet, and telecommunications giant Sprint has announced the launch of its wireless emergency alerts program that will deliver messages from the federal government directly to millions of Americans as part of a system set to become mandatory on all new cell phones. You have to opt in on the currently existing cell phones, but the new ones will have a special chip that coordinates with these government alert messages, and probably, I would imagine, may have surveillance technology involved as well. And all the majors are lined up to participate in this, so good luck getting out of that one unless we say no nationally. On the unconstitutional front, as well as the puppet president front, Obama uses the auto pen again to sign a bill into law. He's overseas, I think, dealing with some of the Asian foreign policy this week, but he needed to suddenly sign a bill allowing the government to continue on a budgetary matter, so they decided to use this mechanical device that copies his signature rather than having the president physically sign the bill. Article 1, Section 7 of the Constitution says if the president approves a bill, quote, he shall sign it. No provision is made for having a substitute signature affixed by a mechanical device or designated aid. Now, you've seen the kings and emperors of the past with their little seal that they use to sign bills, but here in America, it's been a physical signature. So is it unconstitutional for Barack Obama to use the auto pen? They get into how under President George W. Bush, the lawyers argued for the right to use the auto pen, but Bush himself never used it. Obama, however, previously used this sort of like tacitly agreed upon power to sign extensions of the Patriot Act. Robo-signing the Patriot Act doesn't sound like a good idea to me. Sounds doubly unconstitutional, something we should certainly keep a watch on. Now, as you know, Alex is on a working vacation, partly to check out many of the United Nations held national parks across the country, and he's been giving continuous updates through his iPhone on the Alex Jones channel and posted at Infowars.com. You just saw one of the exclusive videos a few minutes ago.